I absolutely love the Chaos Dwarfs and I think that they're a lot of fun. The biggest criticism they have is that there is just too many mechanics. On top of mechanics, you have 4 different types of resource, but I've got a really simple system that I'm going to share with you, and this comes in the form of some tips, which we're going to run through now. Jumping straight into tip number 1, and that is every capital should be a tower. So the tower can only be built at capitals. You should always build the tower there. You need it to build military buildings, as well as the only way to increase your conclave influence. Every building builds 1. This can build up to 6. Talk about that in a later section. Let's stay focused on the economy. Even at tier 1, towers work pretty fine. They've got a really great building which develops gold and it costs raw materials, so this can be a nice way to give your economy a break, and this is a really great return on investment. Make sure every province has a tower as a capital, and make sure it has one of these. Tip number 2, when in doubt, build outposts. You will need raw materials and gold galore in the early game, and the outpost is the building which produces both of these. Getting your outpost to tier 2 will allow you to build the mine, which I would typically build first, build your raw materials, and then once that's tier 2, build the gold building. Even just leaving that at tier 1 will give you a nice return on investment. Be careful when increasing these to tier 3 because the return on investment does get slower. Factories can't build gold for you, so the fact that this can do both of these means that your economic heart will really come from outposts, not factories. So factories are kind of the step 2 and outposts are the step 1, but you need a fair amount of step 1 to produce step 2. That takes us nicely into tip number 3, which is build outposts wide and build factories tall. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the return on investment for factories building up to tier 2, 3 and so forth is going to be much better than it is for building outposts up to tier 2 and tier 3. You get diminishing returns on the outposts, whereas you actually get stronger returns on your armament production of your factories. Essentially, this means you want lots of tier 2 outposts littered across your empire and only a few factories to start off with. Now this will snowball in the late game, and eventually, funnily enough, you'll have so many raw materials moving in that you will end up just spamming factories instead. But this is a 2-step process, and this is the reason why, when in doubt, take an outpost and build the raw materials building. Just a quick reminder guys, if you are enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps out. Ask any question in the comments, I answer everything. And if you'd like to talk strategy, feel free to join the Discord. Now the big question is, what combination of buildings yields the best result? Well, it's a bit complicated. Ultimately, it depends on whether there is a resource building there and the number of settlements in the province. Factories are more defensible. It is a completely sound decision to put a factory on the edge of your empire just for defensive purposes. Tip number 6, your first province breaks many of the rules. You should always have one of each building in your first province. Each lord has a 3 settlement province, should always have 1 tower, 1 factory, and 1 outpost. The reason is because of this building here. Everyone has a drill in their primary capital, and this will produce some armaments as well as some raw materials. All of these buildings will get benefit from this, therefore you want them, and also you'll need armaments in the early stages to build the military buildings, to develop your heroes, and these are so important. The next tip is large provinces versus small provinces. Now large provinces you would think might have an issue because you will just have so many laborers in there, but that's actually a good thing because the outposts allow you to reduce the public order, meaning that you get a lot of benefit by controlling one really large province very well. So your large provinces should always be what I call mining towns. 3 outposts or 2 outposts and 1 factory. Of course, that last slot, if possible, is always a tower. That's a non-negotiable. You will see some 2 settlement provinces all the way through your campaign, and these I recommend to put your factories in instead. So large provinces, go for outposts. Small provinces, go for factories. The reason being is you need to always accept labor and then redirect the slaves into that province. The efficiency of your empire can be seen at the very top of the screen. Now this doesn't provide any bonuses per se, but it does show you how many provinces can intake new workers. Each province can produce a certain amount of raw materials, depending on the number of mines you have there. If you don't have enough workers, you will produce proportionally less. Once every few turns, take a look and see if there's provinces which are absolutely bursting with workers and others which don't have enough. Again, this doesn't mean you're losing money, but you are using building slot for something that's not being used. While having a large workforce will hurt your control, you still have the buildings in the outpost and the capital available to you to help decrease this. Tip number 8, and this is so important, please understand the value of iron and of marble. These two are invaluable for your economy. This is an iron mine, so as usual, it burns off some raw materials to produce some armaments. It's a pretty decent amount of raw materials, but if you look at the number of armaments, this is one of the most efficient ways to produce armaments in the entire game. Quite similar, the marble building instead produces raw materials, and the materials per head is just off the scale to what you can typically achieve. Again, it build up this town, and this is why the Desolation of Astragoth is such a great province. So try to get an idea of whereabouts these mines are, because they will really help carry you. Now for the next tip is that people don't understand what this building does. The tool manufactory in the factory increases raw material production for the entire province by 30%. But here's the thing, you could have 3 of these and it still won't equal what one outpost mine could produce. So remember, this is not replacing it, this is just giving you some economy on top. So why would you build a factory for this? The reason being is you're increasing output without increasing the labor requirement. This means you need less slaves to produce the same amount of raw materials. Therefore, less slaves in the province means you're burning less off. So yes, build this building. It is fantastic, but understand this is an aid, not a replacement to your mines. While we're here, let's talk about refinery building, the building that gets your raw materials and then transfers them into gold. Now, why would you build this building? The only time I ever build a refinery building is if you have just gone overboard by building too many outposts and you have astronomical raw materials. It's going off the charts and you need to just curtail it down a bit. This is what you do, is you transfer it back into gold. But please listen to me here. In the late game, you will not need gold. There is so much gold, you'll be swimming in gold, but you will still need raw material and you will still need armaments. Look at this building as an overcorrection. You just have simply too much raw materials to convert into useful armaments, so therefore convert it into gold. For the next tip, let's just talk about research, and when looking at the way you start your economy, the most appealing ones will be to increase your hero caps, because these will help you through the early game. Also increasing your melee defense on your dwarfs, I just think you cannot go past that. But in terms of your economy, you of course want labor quotas to give you more workers, but extended shifts is an incredibly useful building. Now, I wouldn't rush this too early in the early game, but 10% raw material output across your economy, as well as every gold building in every outpost, will also generate 50 more gold. Another reason why I believe the strategy put forward here is a good long-term one that you can grow with. Hotter furnaces will help you develop more armaments, as well as resource allocation. Other technologies are specific to a type of resource, and those are also good, but you often want the global ones like this, which will also make developing armaments themselves more efficient. Just to explain how this does work, so we finally got back to this. So as long as you have 1 seat in this column here, once it's fully filled, everyone who put 1 point in here will get this global bonus. Now, the very first skill you should go for is simply this, an extra 100 raw materials per turn. This adds up a lot in the early game. The second should always be this, which gives you a base of 25 extra armaments as well as 5% extra output. So these two are the cornerstone. Here, the second to last tower will give you an extra 5% more efficiency on your conversion to armaments, as well as lower the workload. If another Chaos Dwarf beats you to a seat, just suck it up, put some seats in other places so you get the passive, and then just confederate them and you get all of their bonuses. Conclave influence can be used to increase the level of your settlement, very similar to what Skaven do. Now, the only times I would ever use this are in the early game, very sparingly, because you need those early buffs, but to get it to tier 2, because as you see, you need tier 2 to unlock your heroes, which are a great use in the early game. Other than that, save your influence for the tower buffs, but in the late game, once you finish the tower, then you've got nothing else to spend it on, so you will just be turning every single tower to tier 5 that you come across. So these guys snowball harder than almost anyone else, and that's pretty much the Chaos Dwarf economy in a nutshell. Just starting province should have all 3 buildings. In every time that there's a major settlement or a capital, always build a tower, and then aim to build majority outposts. Keep in mind the factories can be built up to have towers, so having them on the periphery of your empire can be beneficial, but in the early game, expect to have at least a 2 or 3 to 1 ratio of outposts to factories. Get those outposts to level 2, producing both gold and raw materials. In small provinces, have your factories. Big provinces, have your outposts. Tech up, just keep building those outposts, and soon you'll find you have so much raw materials you can just start really hammering lots of factories to convert them into armaments, allowing you to build what you want when you want with all the goodies attached to them. Don't worry about attaching armaments at least until turn 20, probably even turn 30. Chaos Dwarf units are just really good, they don't need it, but you do you, have fun the way you want. Hope it's been useful. Let us know in the comments what you want to see next. This is Elven, I'll see you next time.